We're kicking off the new year with some great insight and tools to help you make 2025 the best year in your business ever. And to help me do that, on the podcast, we have Sandro Forte. And Sandro is done it all. He has built a great wealth management business in the UK, and his insights are going to be fantastic. Have a piece of paper and pen, because for this podcast, you're going to need it. So welcome to 2025. We're well past the holidays now. We're into the new year. Everyone's all excited, and it's time to think about what do we want to accomplish over this next year. And one of the big key factors, I think, when looking at your goals and the New Year's resolutions and all those things, is really what you should think about is what is the type of business you want to build. It can be a really exciting process, but sometimes we just think of like little things. But really, it's what is the type of business that you want to build? Where do you want to see this go? And that can also feel very overwhelming. And so what I thought is to help us think through what is actually possible, let's talk to somebody who has made just a huge mark on this industry and a huge mark with his own clients. We have Sandro Forte. Met Sandro in Montreal. I saw his talk and I'm like, oh, this is my kind of guy. This is my guy. We're going to have hours of things to talk about, but we'll see what we can condense it down to today. Because he's somebody that we should all aspire to. He's built one of the top financial advisory firms in all of the UK. And his story really is inspiring. It's, how he started at a very young age, started at the age of 21 and built, just a fabulous career. Currently he's principal partner of Forte Financial. He's a keynote speaker. That's how I met him. And he helps entrepreneurs right around the world. He started, as I said, at a young age. We have this in common. We both started at, he's 21. I started when I was 20, very quickly, within 2 years, became one of the top producers for a UK company, recruited to lead another one, and then finally did what we all do, which is started his own company, which has now grown exponentially. And we were talking a little bit, now his son's coming in, which I'm going to go that direction a little bit later on as well. So if you don't know who he is, right, he's the host of the hugely popular podcast series, the Sandro Forte podcast. He's also the author of international best-selling books, Dare to Be Different. Great book. Everyone should pick it up. And what is really, really cool about this dude is that he's a dedicated philanthropist. This sounds almost amazing, like unbelievable, really. He's raised over 25 million pounds by himself for good causes. He's a great speaker. He's worked all across various industries, but he's really known in the financial advice business. And he also has his own success master class programs. And, he is not somebody who just does these. He actually guarantees that he will improve personal performance by 30%. I could go on, but let's have Sandro tell his story. Sandro, thank you so much and welcome to Turning the Page.
Thank you, Chris. It's very humbling, actually, not just for that very kind introduction, but for you to even choose me. I can only assume you must have run out of names, but I will do my best to justify your faith in me.
I think we can squeeze some information out of you in the next little while that we have together. So why don't we start how I always start? Tell us your story. How did you get here to where you are today?
Well, during that very kind introduction, you said I started in the business at the age of 21. And I would say a lot of people talk of it as an industry. I think it's a profession. I'm very proud of it. But just to add some perspective here, Chris, I didn't do terribly well for the first couple of years. And I think there was a very specific reason for that. And that was, you mentioned earlier during your initial introduction about New Year's resolutions. And I think what I was guilty, as so many people are, of doing was I had all these lofty goals. I decided about all these things I wanted to achieve at the age of 21. And I could see, miles down the road of life and business, but then did what most people do, unfortunately, which is, I followed the way that I was being told to do it by people who read it in a manual, read it in a book, listened to a speaker on a stage, never actually done it. And so I started making all the phone calls, and I was told make 100 to get 2 sales. And, it was an unmitigated disaster. So, I quit twice in the first 2 years.
Really?
Yeah. I decided after the first 6 months that I was never going to make it as a sales professional. and I went off to sell real estate. But the good news was I was worse at selling houses than I was at selling uh, financial products. So my then boss convinced me with a bit of financial help to go back and have another go. He gave me a couple of clients, but it was more my background and the story that was to evolve from my early career that really changed the direction of travel for me. And just to kind of pick up on the question you've asked me, which is, I guess my career, if I'm really honest, started when I was 8 years old, because when I was eight, just coming up to nine, my father passed away. He was a very successful restaurateur. My family are fairly well known in the hospitality industry, and I was forced into helping my auntie, who was a partner in the business, run the business, run the restaurant business, because in an Italian Anglo family, we were all interdependent on one another. And so my mum announced to me at the tender age of nearly 9 that I was now the man of the house. And so I was working 2 hours before school, 2 hours after school, all my summer holidays, right up until the time I went to university. So I didn't really have the stereotypical every day is a summer holiday kind of upbringing. I was working, to supply for and support my family. So I guess that's where the work ethic came from.
Right.
But when I decided by accident, it has to be said, I did not work to become a financial advisor. I certainly didn't wake up at any age when I was a teenager and think this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It happened, if I'm really honest, because I had a basic need to repay my student overdraft when I left university. And I joined this firm because I didn't know anyone else in my hometown. A guy that had been renting a flat, an apartment from my auntie, had started his own financial services business, and he needed some admin support, and that's how it all started. So the first 2 years, really pretty awful, and that was really because I didn't examine the process. And we'll talk, I'm sure, about process. You've heard me speak about it before. I didn't have my own process. I followed blindly what I've been told by, the trainer, the manager, inverted commas, and no disrespect is intended when I say that. But I think we all have to realize that there is a better way. And I then spent the next, 5 or 10 years of my early career, asking myself one question: is what I'm being asked to do the most effective way? And oftentimes the answer was no. And so I set about, which has been refined since, looking at every single part of the process, breaking it down, rebuilding it, adding something to it, and then putting it all back together. It was pretty simple.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. But first, I want to say that, we've had a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and come on this show. And one of the things that seem to have in common is that work ethic, is that you said, that's established very early. I'm not going to throw myself necessarily in that category, but I grew up on a horse farm. My dad trained racehorses. And, people who are farmers or people who've had to, get into situations such as your own, where they became, providers for the family, they had to work. That work ethic sort of sticks with you forever. So that's one thing that I certainly pick up from, your story. The other thing I pick up on your story is the process and how important it is to really focus on that. To your point, a lot of entrepreneurs just do the surface stuff, right? And they just toy around here, toy around there, but you break it all apart. So maybe expand a little bit about what you learned from that of looking at each process and asking you, is this the best way to do it? And then unbreaking it and breaking it. Give us some examples, maybe.
Sure. Before I do that, and not to deviate too much, but just to pick up on the first point you made there, Chris, which is, I think there's two elements to success, if I can call it that, and it's relative. It's different things to different people. But I think number one, you have got to be really serious about what you want to do. You can't go into something, quite serious or 5 out of 10 serious. You have to be convinced that it is the thing you want to do. And to be honest, for the first 2 years, I wasn't convinced. I wasn't serious enough. I'd go off and play golf with my friends and think I can do tomorrow what I could do today. So I wasn't really committed to taking positive action. That's part number one. And then the other thing I think is having a real passion and belief in what we do. And that really came about when I turned 23, because my stepfather, who had really ridden into our lives and become the new breadwinner. I built an amazing relationship with him as I grew up. And he was the one that always said to me, never worry about winning the race of life. Just give it your best shot. Always be the very best you can be. And he became my very first client. I spent 2 years procrastinating, deciding in my mind, we'll talk about the little voice in a moment. But I spent 2 years deciding in my mind that he was never going to buy an insurance policy because he didn't have very much money. And why would they spend money on that when they were struggling to make ends meet? And all those other excuses the little voice gives us, because, of course, the little voice's job is to keep us nice and comfortable. And as we know, and you were very self-deprecating and very humble just now when you said, you don't include yourself necessarily in the work ethic category, but I've seen you in action, Chris, and you and I are very similar in that respect. I've learned over the last 35 years in this amazing profession that hard work, seriousness, and positive action make up for a lack of ability. So I think that's step number one. But to your point, for example, I started the process by picking up the telephone, and it's the good old-fashioned way of communication. I still believe in it. It still works. I still think direct mail works. It's a really good, effective way to communicate with people. And so I would pick up the phone and I would say, hello, my name is Sandro Forte from ABC, and ABC would be the name of my insurance company. And I would wait for a response. And of course, the response was always, I'm not interested, or, how did you get my number, or call me another day, or I'm too busy. And so what I did is I realized by playing around with this system, this process, if you like, that actually by feeding people information that gave them the opportunity to object, I was creating my own problems.
Right.
So what I did, and this is ridiculously simple, but by way of an example to answer your question, I moved the pause. So when I normally invited them to answer, I would just move that opportunity to slightly later in the sentence. So typically I would say, hi, my name is Sandro Forte from ABC, and I was speaking with our mutual friend, Chris, yesterday. I promised Chris I'd give you a call. I'm keeping my promise. Is that okay? And there's an element of psychology there because you're asking a logical question, which is, is that okay? And of course, what I do is I'm moving the focus away from ABC and the perception that ABC as an insurance company by definition means this guy's calling to sell me something. This person, this prospect would now be focusing on our mutual friend, Chris. Or if it wasn't a referral or introduction, as I call it, then I might just say, I'm calling because I make it a professional business practice to work with other business owners just like you in Montreal, for example. So in other words, you are moving the focus away from the thing that creates the problem to the thing that generates some interest. And there's one good example. Objection handling. I was always told, Chris, that the way to handle an objection, somebody would say, I want to think about it. I was told, ask them what they want to think about. But of course, what you're doing is creating confrontation.
I was going to say an argument.
Exactly. You create a barrier between two people. It's basic human psychology, communication, interaction, call it what you will. So I followed and created this 3-step process that starts with welcoming the objection instead of pushing against it. That then disarms the negative. You then create some empathy, which of course is the basic building block of all human relationships. So typically I would say something like, thanks for being so honest, or I'm really pleased you mentioned that, Chris. If I was you, I'd be thinking the same way. So that's your welcome the objection, empathy.
Connection, yep.
And then I always learned that, because I did a psychology degree, so a lot of this came from there. I learned that if you ask a logical question instead of an emotional question, because we've always been told, how would you feel if your family were without the breadwinner? What if you didn't come home tomorrow? And that's a very powerful emotional question, but it doesn't lead people to action necessarily. It doesn't guarantee the yes. Now, a logical question, which of course is engaging the left side of someone's brain by asking a logical question. So someone says, I've got no money. I would follow the first 2 steps and then ask the question, I understand what you're saying. If I could show you, Chris, how I work with my other clients to create money they didn't have before they met me, would that be of value? And by ending with the words of value, You're
Right.
creating a logical questioning process, and the answer by definition will always be yes, because I'm not saying let's take something away from some other part of your financial life and put it towards insurance policies, for example. I'm
Right.
saying, let me show you how I work holistically with other people to generate money. Everyone's interested in that. And one other thing that I learned is that fundamentally people are only interested in three things: themselves, their problems, and their goals and objectives. If you can focus on those three things, by and large, you build a good relationship and you establish very quickly whether you can help them. And I could go on and on and on, because as you know, every
Love it.
part of my process involves that kind of deep analysis of, does this work? If it does, could it work better? And I've just
Right.
constantly evolved that process.
And you built really the machine that you have today, which is your franchise, which is your business. But I want to continue down, because I watched one of the YouTubes that you did about becoming a world-class prospector, and I thought, man, you know what? Entrepreneurs should all try to be world-class prospectors. Like it's a lost art. Like it should be one of your primary goals, because that's the hardest part, is to get new business. Like everyone, pretty well knows how to be a good financial advisor, I hope. Like maybe overgeneralizing there, but where people generally suffer is, how do I get new qualified prospects who are willing to do business with you? And you really expand upon this particular topic, and I love it. And so I have a few questions. Is one is, what brought you to that conclusion, and how can people sort of think of themselves becoming a world-class prospector? And then what motivates you? Because it's hard, right? You get rejected a lot. So maybe expand upon those things.
Well, actually, I don't think you do need to be rejected a lot, actually. Now,
Oh, see?
just for clarity, I did in the early days because I didn't have a robust process. So let me give you a specific example, Chris, that I hope will help everyone listening if they're in any kind of sales related business. So if I take all of us back to that first time we sat with a new prospect, I guarantee, to a man and woman, we sat there opposite the prospect, and somewhere in our mind, deep rooted, was this feeling that we needed them more than they needed us.
Right.
And the prospect knows it. There is a basic non-verbal arrangement between advisor and prospect that says the advisor desperately wants the business because they want to get off to a good start, or meet their annual target, or make their manager happy. There's always a fundamental arrangement non-verbally between two people that says, I need this opportunity more than you need me as your advisor. And the moment you switch that thinking around, which is, it's a learned process, but I'm a great believer, we talked about process already. If anyone focuses on the process, the outcome will always take care of itself. And yet
Right.
what we've been taught, and I grew up in an environment initially where there was a bell in the corner of the office, as I'm sure you did. And
Yes.
somebody would be successful on the telephone. They'd arrange a meeting with a client, and the bell would ring, and they'd all get a pat on the back. And that was the definition of success. And I fundamentally disagree with that,
Right.
because that is only the first part of the process. If you are going to be a successful advisor, you have to build an amazing relationship that is long-standing and sustainable and based on trust. That, to me, is the successful part of the process. If you establish with someone, and so, for example, to give you a tangible, when I meet with somebody for the first time, it's my meeting. I'm not going to sit there hoping that they're going to buy from me. I'm going to lay down the rules. The rules of engagement for me are very simple. We are here today, Chris, for a couple of reasons, I think. The first one is, can we build a relationship? Every relationship we've ever built, the first girl or boy at school, the person we're married to, our kids, are based on one principle. Do you like me? Do I like you? Do we trust each other? Can we build a long-term relationship, right?
Right. Right. Straightforward. Yeah.
Financial services is no different. And yet we've deviated from that because we've always focused on the sale.
Right.
So my contention here is, if we sit down with the prospect and we say, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, can we build a relationship? Now, What that means is you are going to sit here and assess whether or not I'm right for you, but I want you to know I'm also doing the same. So what I've done is I've established right at the beginning that two people are going to make an equal decision about each other. It's not me wanting you, you wanting me. We are going to make a mutual decision about each other. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. If it doesn't work for me, we're shaking hands and walking away. Now, the moment my prospect knows that, they behave themselves because they don't want to be rejected. Human beings,
Right.
no different from advisors, Chris. So, golden rule number one, can we work together ultimately? Number two, can I help you? Now, at the moment, I don't know whether I can help you or not. But what I'm going to do with your permission, confidentially, of course, is gather lots of information. The more information you give me, the better the advice I can give you. Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
Trade-off. Now, what that says to the client or the prospect is they become accountable because the quality of the information they give me determines the quality of the advice I give. So you eliminate all this, I'm not sure I want to give you that information. It's a bit personal. I'll accidentally, deliberately forget to tell you how much I've got in the bank.
Right.
You know, because that happens. Now, the other thing that you can do, since this is your meeting, is you can introduce any other things that typically get in the way for you. So, for example, when I was 21, I looked 14. I kid you not, like ridiculously young. And when I was 21 and I looked 14, it's quite difficult on a Thursday evening at 8 o'clock when you're sitting across somebody's kitchen table to convince them that you are the right man or boy for the job, because they're thinking, what does this young lad know that we don't already know? And so if I don't deal with it, like I don't deal with how I'm paid, or I don't deal with a previous bad experience they've had that I've learned about during the initial phone call, if I don't deal with it at the beginning, it's going to become an objection.
Right.
So I front up. I just say to them, right, before we go any further, I know what you're thinking, Chris. You're thinking, what does this young boy know you don't already know? And they would laugh or smile nervously at each other because they know that I now know what they're thinking. But it kind of gets the elephant out of the room, and I'm able to say, I'm qualified, and ultimately, I can promise you over the course of the next hour or so, you are going to learn things with great respect you didn't know before. So even if we agree to part company and never see each other again, I guarantee that you will be better off having had this hour with me. Okay. And then any other objections that you might want to deal with. But
Right.
why shouldn't that be part of your preamble rather than wait until you present the solution and then on the illustration they say, so Chris, you're earning like $10,000 for this. I mean, that seems an excessive amount of money. I always say at the first meeting, just to let you know, Chris, I'm running this meeting at my own cost. I never say free, but this is at my cost. If we decide to do business together at some point in the future, I will get paid by my carrier, for example. And there will be days, months, years where I do lots of work and get paid nothing because there's no work to do.
Right. Yeah.
There will be other occasions when there is something to do and I'm going to get paid. In isolation, if you look at that piece of work relative to what I get paid, you may conclude that that is excessive. But over the course of what I hope will be 25, 30 years of working together, I guarantee it's all going to smooth itself out. And if you never feel that that's the case, if you're not getting value, let's have a conversation about it.
Right.
And once I deal with that, whenever I present the illustration in the future and it's got $30,000 on it, they remember the rules.
Right.
And if they don't, then I take them back to the rules that they agreed with me right at the beginning. So that's a very, very long-winded answer to your question. But what I'm saying here is that I think we create a lot of our own objections and rejection just because we adopt this mental approach, subconscious approach, which basically says, I need you, Chris, a lot more than you need me. And I think that if you think the other way around, if we walk away from each other, it's your loss, it's not mine.
Right.
That takes a strong mindset, but it's absolutely the right way to approach it.
Well, I think that mindset probably comes from, being a true believer, meaning that that you create value. You've actually been there. You've seen it. And I know that in Montreal, you shared a very personal story, and I hope you share it on how you became such a believer in your own family and your story of your stepfather. So maybe share like that. I think is part of the fundamental of what makes you different in this business is in your heart of hearts the value that you create for other people. So if you would, I would love you to share that.
Sure. I go back to the first couple of years of my career. I felt like, I was just a robot going through the motions of what I've been taught from a sales manual. And, I was filling in fact finds and asking the questions, and I don't think I really believed what I was doing.
Right.
During those first couple of years when I elected to play golf rather than see clients and make all the other excuses, right? It was always somebody else's fault. It was never mine. And I'd spent 2 years during that early part of my career thinking my stepfather Dave, has to be a client. He's the breadwinner in the family.
Right.
So in 1989, when I joined the business, I started this conversation in my mind, and we're all guilty of listening to the little voice who would say he hasn't got very much money, the weather's not so good, he's a bit late home from work, now's not the right time. And I had this conversation every single day, literally for 2 years. And it was the 8th of December, 1991. So 2 and a bit years after I'd started the business. And I sat down with him one day. I just found myself in the room on our own, and it was a kind of really awkward conversation. And I don't even remember what I said, but it was something like, because of what happened to Dad, and my mum had been made bankrupt as a result of my father's death because she had no business experience. She couldn't keep the business running. That passed to my auntie. We lived in this huge house, so everything had to go. And I just didn't really want that to happen again, of course. And so I said to my stepfather, Dave, is there any way that you could possibly think to take out some life insurance and help me out a little bit? And to my surprise, Chris, he said, yes, I've been thinking about this myself, and I'm surprised you haven't talked to me about it before. And this started the process, which involved me selling my very first insurance policy in the business after 2 years. And and I think I was probably prouder of that than anything I've ever achieved in my life. All the philanthropic stuff and the help I've given to other advisors, and the book, and my family, and all the other things. And there's a reason for that, because during the time that I was thinking about Dave becoming a client, kicking the metaphorical can down the road, unbeknownst to any of us, Dave was also dying from cancer, like my father died 13 years previously. And he had a very aggressive form of stomach cancer. He was only 2 premiums into the new insurance policy that we'd set up in the December, when I got home from work one day, walked into the living room. My mum was there with the family doctor and my stepfather. And we were told that he didn't have very long to live at all. And ironically, he'd been for a medical for the insurance policy, and they just hadn't picked up any of the symptoms. So it was, by the grace of God, really, that we've sat there dealing with, what was a terrible situation, but safe in the knowledge that there was this insurance policy in the background. And I remember on the day he passed away, I was with him by his bedside, and it was the only time I'd been alone with him, because my brother and my sisters, I've got a big family, we'd all been with him in 2s and 3s for days and days and days. And it just so happened, one morning, it was about 11 o'clock, he'd been unconscious for a day and a half. He was covered in pipes, and they'd had to open his chest because the cancer was spreading so rapidly. It was horrific. But he somehow, without any kind of warning, opened his eyes. He looked straight in my eyes, and he said to me, "Son, thank you for what you did for your family. I'm so proud of you." And I still get emotional when I think about that, because when I thought about it afterwards, Chris, I realized that, I hadn't done, I thought, well, all I've done is set up an insurance policy. But what he said in that moment, and I think it was a deliberate gift that he passed me, which I try to pass to others. He said, "Thank you for what you did." And it's the emphasis on the word "did" that really resonated with me. Earlier in your introduction, you mentioned New Year's resolutions, and I see so many advisors, people in life generally, and what they do is they sit down at the start of the year and they say, right, this year I'm going to be the number one advisor in my company. I'm going to spend more time with my kids. I'm going to get to the gym. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to stop smoking. And it's just a wish list. And I learned very quickly there is a big difference between desire and decision. How many people have got that kind of the list of things they're going to do, or the prospecting list that looks exactly the same 12 months later. But of course, what happens is the little voice in our shoulder when we get to the end of the year and we haven't done any of the things that we've promised ourselves we will do, the little voice just has this uncanny way of saying, well, don't worry, Chris, there's always next year. And then, of course, all you do is you kick the can down the road. You blame your manager, you blame the company. If only they'd issued or released this product a bit sooner. And if COVID hadn't come along, and if we hadn't had Zoom, that, they're not reasons for a lack of success, they're excuses.
Right.
So what he told me that day, it transformed me as a person, because what I realized in that moment was we are a product of what we do. That's it. You can have any number of certificates on the wall. You can have been in this business for 40 years. You can have been in it for 40 days. The bottom line is you get judged by, and you are successful based on what you do, putting one foot in front of the other. Now, for all of those people out there who say, well, hang on a minute, this person came into money. He joined his dad's business. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Every single one of us started from exactly the same place. And I'll use the walking metaphor. When we were kids, 18 months old, we'd have spent probably best part of 12 months looking at typically mum and dad, walking from one place to another in life, metaphor again. And in our little minds that had no filter, no little voice at the time, we would say, wow, that's a much more effective way of doing things than the way I'm doing it right now. Right. And so mum and dad would show us that by putting one foot in front of another and maintaining some balance, we could move more effectively than the way we did it before. And of course, this new technique was alien to us. We didn't succeed the first time. In fact, we didn't succeed for 100, 200, 500 attempts at this newfound way of doing things. But yet somehow, every time we fell over and we felt embarrassed or we were physically hurt, and everything in us, in our body and our mind says, don't do that anymore, we didn't. We just picked ourselves up and repeated the process until it became a learned skill.
Right.
And I am absolutely 100% convinced that we can learn success in life, in business, exactly the same way that we learned how to walk, talk, swim, ride a bicycle, drive a car.
Right.
It's about turning conscious incompetence into subconscious or unconscious competence. It's a simple theory, difficult to execute because it needs commitment and desire, right, and a plan and a process. But I'm absolutely convinced everyone can do it.
Absolutely. But you have to, I think, first, thank you very much for sharing that story. And sorry that all that happened to you, because, it must have been incredibly difficult at the time, but it probably made you who you are today. Is that sort of pivotal moment where you saw the incredible amount of value that not only that you provided for your family, but then you were able to provide for so many more, and to share that information with so many other people. So hopefully they could in turn create great lives for their clients. So, that whole, your concept and, going through your book, Dare to Be Different, that's how I think, from starting as a true believer, a true passion in what you did, it made you different and stand out in the business. So you've built it different from other firms. What other things have you focused on? Like, I love all your work in the client experience, and this is why I knew that we would get along. I spent my whole career on what I call the total client experience, as a step-by-step process of perfecting, making people feel good about the process of wealth management. But maybe talk a little bit about some of yours and some of the things that you've really found that people just love. They think is fantastic.
Well, again, we could have a whole podcast just on this.
I think we might, but let's see. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I think the first thing is let's break it down to its most fundamental component part, which is most advisors don't understand one simple equation in this business. And the equation is that your reputation, our reputation as professional people or as companies, is based on a couple of things. It's the experience we deliver minus the expectation that the prospect walks into our life with. So what I mean by that is that one size does not fit all. Every single person will have a different expectation of what service looks like. And I've seen loads of advisors all over the world, Chris. They spend tens of thousands putting together amazing brochures, and they send Christmas cards and birthday cards, which they rarely maintain because they get too busy and so on,
or bored.
but they think marketing is about spending dollars, and it's not. It's about, when you onboard a new client, is asking what I call the killer question, which is, Chris, what does amazing service, what does a great relationship look like to you? If you could fast forward 1 year and look back, what would the first year have had to have been like for you to have really benefited from this relationship? And you will tell me, you will say, well, to be honest, I'm a city trader. I'd rather you just leave me alone. Well, if that's your expectation, then I've got to manage that expectation by matching or exceeding it.
Right.
Conversely, other end of the spectrum, divorcee, no financial experience, somebody recently bereaved, sold their business, maybe somebody who doesn't have a lot of financial experience. Maybe their expectation is they want you to hold their hand for the first year. Can you call me every 3 months? Am I able to just reach out to you whenever I need you? Absolutely. That's their expectation. So instead of saying this is our proposition is based entirely on what the client wants from us. And that's
I love that.
That's the basic principle, the foundation upon which you service. Number one, you've got to know what the client wants. Otherwise, you cannot build a service proposition. Other little things like, I always call my clients on their birthday because no other professional does that. You then subconsciously become part of their inner circle. I always send a handwritten note thanking them for an introduction. I build, good relationships with other professional people. We have a guaranteed service charter, which is a written document that says, here's all the things you can expect from us. And when you write something down, people always trust in it more than if you say it out loud.
Right.
And then even little things like our out of office. I've lost count, Chris, of the number of times where, I've sent somebody an email and I get the standard out of office email reply that says, I'm away on vacation. I won't be back until such and such.
Blah, blah,
If you're, yada, yada, the drill. And so many people just, use the standard Google out of office reply. Now, I regularly pick up between 7 and 12 new clients every year just from our out of office response.
Oh, wow. Think of that.
Which says, for example, hi, I'm away, thank you so much for your email. I'm away on vacation right now, returning on whatever date it might be. And I know I'm supposed to say I won't have access to my emails, but that's simply not true. My phone never leaves my side, so I can definitely respond to messages if I need to. But I've promised my other half that I would get away, relax, and recuperate. And to be quite honest, I'm absolutely terrified of her. So if your message is truly, or email is truly urgent, please contact my office manager, Vicky, in the first instance. She'll get a message to me and I will gladly return your call. Now, I never get anyone ever contact me because they respect the fact that I'm away, but more importantly, they respect the fact that I'm just being really honest and transparent. And the fundamental behind trust is openness and transparency. So why not be that way in all your communications? So it might sound like a little thing, but if you repackage it all, you look at the service charter, the handwritten notes, the telephone calls. People walk into my office, which I want them to do. I don't want to visit them. It's a time saver if they come to me. Instead of walking to my office and they get would you like a tea or coffee? Because that's what you get wherever you go. They get given a drinks menu, and the drinks menu has got, cappuccino, latte, Americano, and it's got orange juice, water, champagne. And just the fact that you have somebody say, welcome to the office, would you like to choose a drink from the menu? It's just, again, you break every single thing down, package it all back up, and then that's what creates client experience. And if you look at all the great brands, the Starbucks, nothing to do with the quality of their product or the price they sell them at. McDonald's, people don't go there for a good meal. Apple, are they any better than Samsung? I have no idea. Amazon, I can give you countless examples, Chris, but they have all built their business on one principle, and that is delivering great client experiences. That's all I try to do.
Ones that are remarkable so that they tell other people about them, and ones that they remember. And I was thinking about when you were saying the beverage menu, because we do that in our client experience. But one of the other things, and you probably tried this as well, is we started to put welcome signs. So welcome, Sandro, as you came in.
Yeah.
We got more compliments of that welcome sign than probably anything else we did. In fact, we had stories of clients taking pictures with themselves with the welcome sign and posting it on social media. And to your point, if we got them great returns on their investment, I don't think they'll be taking a picture and sending that to all their friends and posting it on social media as well.
When we were in lockdown 2020, one of the things that we knew no other advisor was doing was reaching out to clients. They were all, in bed with the metaphorical duvet over their head. And we engaged a marketing firm to put together a COVID help PDF magazine. It was 72
I
pages.
did see that. Super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, like recipes, games for kids, homeschooling, crosswords, puzzles, home fitness techniques, the whole shebang. And we sent it to all of our clients with one simple request. If you like it, send it to someone else. And it reached 3,152 new prospects. We got absolutely swamped with new business inquiries from people who said, our advisor's never done anything like this for us. Again, I think that cost me $600 to create that document, and it reached 3,100 people. So,
you see, it's those little things, as I say, it's the little things that counts. It's the little things that people remember, and coming right out of your book, be different. Don't try to be like every other advisor. Don't try to be like any other business. Try to be very unique and very genuine. You come across as very genuine in what you're trying to do for clients. And now you have this success masterclass, these programs that help people improve. Maybe expand upon some of the things you go through there and some of the things that people have said as they've come out of that program.
Well, let's start at the end and work our way backwards. So currently the record holder for the biggest increase in productivity within the first 12 months is a lovely young lady who's become a little bit of a mentee of mine since she's phenomenally successful now. She did 358% increase in productivity.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Awesome.
The minimum is 30%, and that's based that's based on the fact that I'm not on this podcast saying for 1 second, Chris, that I've got the answers to everybody's problems and challenges in life. And I'm not saying I'm better than any other advisor out there. What I'm saying is I've spent 35 years perfecting a system that's based on three things. One, a really, really strong, robust mindset. And there's a whole bunch of techniques that can help there. The positioning piece, which is establishing the rules. And another one, if I can just deviate for a second, because you touched on prospecting earlier. Right. One really easy way to prospect is not to ask for referrals, because again, what we're guilty of doing is we say social media messaging is the same. It's always about what the advisor wants. Can you introduce me to, join my network? Well, that's of no benefit to you as a prospective client. You've got to see the benefit for you to be able to help me. So when I'm fact finding, what I normally say is, okay, you've told me, Chris, if anything happened to you, your mum and dad would deal with your estate, brother and sister-in-law would deal with the kids, and you've told me you've got a couple of kids. Now, if we agree to work together, I'm going to need to meet these people because they all form part of the holistic financial plan for you and your family. I'm not here to sell you an insurance policy. That's called transactional advice. And that's not what I do. So if you're looking for transactional advice, do me a favor, go buy off the internet, because that's the cheap place to buy it, right?
Yeah, not there.
So I'm going to need to meet these people, because by meeting them, that benefits you, Chris, because they know where the money is. They know where the policy document is. It's not going to stay sitting in a drawer for 20 years and no one knows what you've got. I help them through the process. I help them with the claim. And when you then feel the benefit to you, you gladly introduce me. But if I say to you, oh, Chris, now you've become a client, now you're signing on the dotted line, can you think of anybody that would benefit from the same service?
Right.
In my experience, most people say, I can't think of anyone right now. Sure. Anyway, to your question, the Success Masterclass basically starts from the most important place, which is you've got to get this bit right up here. Yeah. And it's some techniques that help you back to that original process of putting one foot in front of another, maintaining some balance and doing it a better way, right the way through the positioning piece. So prospecting and marketing, first meeting, all the things that you do and don't do. What I call the meeting report, which is a bridge between first and second meeting, which is a summary of everything that we discussed. It keeps the client focused. It keeps them on track, stops them wandering off to talk to other advisors. Second meeting, how do you present solutions that, get people to reach a successful conclusion without procrastinating? How do you get, average case size up? How do you increase clients? How do you get referrals or introductions? And then into the service proposition, because ultimately, if we're going to work really hard to acquire new clients, we don't want to be spending all of our time trying to keep the clients we've worked so hard to get. So there's got to be a natural arrangement between advisor and prospect that we want to work together. We are committed to that process. And if I have sustainable relationships, I have a sustainable business. If I manage or exceed expectations, I get more referrals.
Right.
And it's a self-perpetuating 360-degree circle. I can honestly say I cannot remember the last time I asked for a referral. It's got to be 30 years ago.
Right. Because if you create value, they'll want to share that value with other people.
Yeah.
That's rule number one of business. I love it. So, you've done so much. What's next? What's next for you?
I love my philanthropic work. I'm currently the president of the $1 Million Roundtable Foundation, which I'm very proud to have served for 27 years. Continue my fundraising efforts. I do all kinds of mad things. There's very nearly, let you into a little secret, there's very nearly a second book finished. So that's going to be quite exciting because I sold a few copies of the first book. I'm a dedicated dad. My son and daughter actually work in the business, and I've got two wonderful grandkids. So for me, I grew up in a very close-knit family, want that to continue. I've got a lovely home in Italy, so I want to spend a bit more time there. But actually, you know what? I do believe, Chris, that it's incumbent upon all of us to help others. And so my masterclass and the presentations that I give in different parts of the world, though limited, because my time is limited,
Sure,
it's something I really enjoy, because a bit like, if anyone listening has ever delivered the death claim, and it's an awful, bittersweet moment. But if you get an email from someone who says, I attended your masterclass, or I heard you speak, and the penny dropped, and I totally get it now, and you've transformed. I got an email today from a lovely Canadian lady who said, who has struggled a little bit over the last couple of years, and I shared a few of these thoughts with her. She sold her first $1 million policy today, and the first person she reached out to was me, and she said it was because of what I taught her, but actually it was down to her, and I told her so in my reply, because she made a conscious decision to take action. She didn't leave anything on the page. She was super serious about doing it. She put one foot in front of the other, and these are the results. So lots more of that, I hope. And I love what I do. They'll carry me out of this business in a wooden box. I'm absolutely sure of it. And you know what? I feel so blessed, Chris, to have my health, touch wood, and the fact that I can help so many people, not just advisors, but clients too. And I go back to what I said right at the beginning, which is, if you focus on the process, you deliver what you do with passion and commitment and a belief that you are really transforming the lives of people. Because, I believe ours is one of the most noble professions. Outside of the medical profession, we literally change people's lives. If you can keep focused on that, as I said, the outcome will always take care of itself.
That is exactly, as I said, I knew we had so much in common. I've actually probably used that exact line in some of my talks, because we do have a noble profession. And what you were doing, Sandro, is fantastic. You were spreading that message. You're spreading that true believer passion that you have about this industry and about the process, and focusing on the client experience. So, congratulations to all your success. And I'm certainly happy to have you on the podcast. Any final words for our audience?
No, I'll go back to the words of my stepfather, Dave. he thanked me for what I did for my family, but one of the overriding messages that he kept drilling into me when I was a teenager was just be the best you can be. Life isn't about winners and losers. It's about being able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of every day and ask yourself and answer this question. Did I leave anything out there? Did I give it my very best today? And if the answer is yes, I mean, you are making a lot of progress in life. If not, you have to just adjust your thinking, perhaps reevaluate, what you want for yourself, how much commitment and passion there is behind it. But too many people can't answer that question terribly positively. So I think as long as we can all get to that point where we think, was I the very best I could be today? If the answer is yes, you are heading in the right direction.
Wise words. Thank you so much, Sandro Forte. Dare to be different. Thank you for joining us on Turning the Page.
Thanks, Chris.